Fisher in District 7, Township 7, and wanted to have a little town hall meeting. So I invited, figuring there was going to be some questions about the public schools. I invited David Hale. He's the new school board member. And David, why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself?
Well, if you haven't had a chance to get to know me a little bit, I grew up right here within a block or two, so I am local. I am the representative for District 5, which is the Brunson Creekside, and obviously our feeder schools, H.J. McDonald Junior High School. I'm an educator from the family of educators, and each day I learn a little more about education and where it's going. If you have questions about education, I will truly be honest with you and tell you where I am on it. And if I don't know the answer, I'll tell you that, and we'll try to get you an answer. And the last part, which I compliment Steve for this, when I ran, I said we need to have public forums. We need to communicate what's happening. This is a wonderful opportunity, and I will not shy away from it. I have also communicated with the board, and sometime they want to have a forum of its own. But again, I welcome that. And with that,
well, I want to tell them a little bit more about you.
Okay.
Being a local guy, he graduated from Liberty High School. He went on as a successful career in the United States Air Force, retired from that, and flew airplanes for a living with Delta. And he also taught public school system. Are you still teaching?
no, actually, when I retired, I went into counseling. I had a degree in counseling. I was a counselor at Tucker Creek down in Havelock. So it made me more fluent, at least on what's happening at our middle schools. And then to some degree elementary, because they fed, and we had to go speak to the elementary as we stepped them up. We obviously prepare 8th grade for high school, so I think I can still talk. There's a lot that is changing, as you know, and happening in education, but I still feel very compelled to be a voice for you and a part of this.
Okay, we have somebody from the city of Newbern, Alderman Eddie Booker. He's here now.
Hi, everybody. I think I've met most of you. I've been an alderman for almost 4 years, first term that I ran, and I represent now the geography has changed. I basically represent every city household on this side of the river. Plus, I have the Bridgeton area. A lot of people don't realize that there are about 100 homes in Bridgeton that are in the city of Newbern. That's a long story that I can't really give you the real background on, but Bridgeton people are part of Ward 3, as well as the area on this side of on the other side of the river along Country Club Road, Old Town, and some of those areas. So, Ward 3 is as it should be now, represents all the communities on this side. It was just pretty much Taberna, and now it's Carolina Colors and all the communities. So I thank you all for coming out tonight, and we don't have much of an agenda as far as what we're going to say. We're mostly here to see what you folks have to say, and Steve, I'll let you take it from there.
Okay, well, I'm going to just point out my district, Township 7, I said, but my district is changing quite drastically. Probably, I hope this year, we'll have the maps approved by the Justice Department. But my district did go from the Trent River all the way into Havelock. I had quite a few areas in Havelock that were actually in my district. And the way they've been redrawn to make them more balanced is my district's going to end at Noose Harbor now, pretty much, I believe. So I see Jan is here. She's from Carolina Pines, and I'm representing her now, but that's probably going to change soon. The reason that was done is that there's been so much growth in this in Township 7 that I had 21,000 people in my district. Lee K. Allen, who represents Township 6, and Theron McCabe, who represents Township 5, had about 6,000 or 7,000 in their district. Well, the law says the districts have to be balanced in population. They're supposed to be, by the federal law, plus or minus a couple of percent. They have allowed as much as 5, but they like to see it a couple of percent. So when they did the last census, we had to redraw and come in compliance with the law. And so with that, anybody here is welcome to ask a question about the City of Newbern, Macon County, and the schools. See if we can answer your question.
Let me just make one other comment. If you live in Taverna, Creekside, any of these communities around here, you are in the city of New Bern, but you're also in Township 7. So he is your representative from the county standpoint. I'm your representative from the city standpoint. So I wanted to clarify that. And David is representing all the schools on this side. So just make one other comment. I've had people who live in the city say to me, why do we pay double taxes? I'm not trying to get anybody fired up or anything tonight, but I thought it was maybe worthwhile to explain, Steve, right off the bat, what you're paying for when you pay taxes to both the county and to the city, and what you get, where those dollars go. Because the county is distinctively different than the city, and while you write two checks, you're paying for different things. So maybe you might want to clarify that.
I'll list the four biggest things that the county does for you in terms of employees and in terms of dollars spent. The first would be schools. The county doesn't support all the cost of the school, but we support it to the tune of about $22 million, I believe it is. And what do we do? Most people typically think that we provide school bills, and we do that. But we also, about half of our money is spent on employees. We hire teacher assistants, I think assistant principals, custodians at the school. About half our money spent is for salaries. The next biggest thing, really it's actually bigger than the amount that we spend on the schools, is the Department of Social Service. That's about $22 to $24 million out of the county coffers. The next big item is the health department. That's about $10 million line item. And then the sheriff's department in the jail is about $10 million combined. Those are the four biggest ones. Some others, Parks and Rec did not have a Parks and Recreation department. And they finally hired an employee to help put on just some things, activities for adults and children. But now we've got several pretty substantial county parks. And so that, that's something that the government used not to provide, the county government didn't provide. That was typically left to cities, but we've kind of inherited that. And, Manny?
Yeah, well, and for the city, our biggest expense, over half the dollars that you pay to the city, are for two items. And they're both called public safety. And you can guess what they are: fire and police. The sheriff's department covers, I can't remember the number, Steve, in the county, but an awful lot of acres, an awful lot of square miles. And the city is probably 2% of the county in geography, and yet we have more money dedicated to the city police department than the entire sheriff's department. At any given moment, there are probably 3 sheriff deputies running around the county at night, where we probably have a dozen patrolmen patrolling the city at night. So while it's a much smaller area, it's obviously much more concentrated, a lot more crime, etc. So our number one expense is fire and police. And whereas the county, the areas that aren't incorporated, their fire protection comes largely from volunteers, like the building we're sitting in right now. So fire, police, and then the city has 20 parks, over 20. I can't remember the exact number, 23 or 25. So the Parks and Recreation Department is fairly big. And then water and sewer is a big department. So the water plant that we had to build out on the west side of the city a couple years ago was $30 million. So that's where your tax dollars are going largely. There are other pieces to the puzzle, but fire, police, water, sewer, and parks make up the bulk of where your tax dollars go. And of course, the other department I didn't mention that's one of the biggest manpower-wise is our streets, the people that maintain the streets, the roads, the curbs, the sidewalks, all that. We got many, many miles, and including that department, we have over 50 miles of ditches and canals that we have to keep clean. So that's where the tax dollars go. And I just thought it would be good to start by distinguishing where your money goes between county and city budgets and we're both working on our budgets right now. trying to get our budgets finalized. They have to be finalized by July 1, and they have to balance. We cannot have a deficit. Isn't that a wonderful thing? We're getting close to finishing the city budget, and I know they're also working to get theirs finalized. So.
Denny, let me say one more thing, and then I'll let David pipe in, but you mentioned water and sewer, but the county's not in sewer anymore, but again, I think it was about 30 years ago that Craven County started to, well, they put in a water treatment plant and started providing water on a limited basis. The reason was that there was, in some parts of the county, they had poor drinking water, and there were some issues with that. But now there is a county water lines down every, down every road, I believe, in this county. There may be one or two that I'm not aware of, but it's pretty well county-wide now. So that's a service that was added on about 30 years ago. And as Denny mentioned, we also had to build a new water treatment plant and put in new wells. The state mandated that. The aquifers that we were in, they said were drying up, and I believe that. Unfortunately, it cost about $35 million to put in this new plant. No taxes were raised to that. Our water department operates almost like a separate entity, a separate business, if you will. We don't put county tax dollars into the county water department. The revenue from the monthly bills and the tap fees pay for all that. Dave?
Want to hear something about education? I want to start off with something very positive. We have a question. I want to make a comment. I'm always learning. My wife is a math teacher, retired math teacher working with the state. The other day, she says, let's find out what is really happening in North Carolina education. And as a math teacher, she pulled up what is called the TIM study. Well, what I heard when I went to my Board of Education training, they asked us to sit on a film called the Finland Experience. You may have heard of it. And Finland has been rated by this TIM study as the #1 school system in the world. So we pulled it up, looked at it. In particular, she was looking at our two benchmarks. We used 4th grade and 8th grade math. The United States was 4 points behind Finland on their benchmark for the 4th grade. North Carolina was ahead of Finland. So we pulled up to 8th grade. I wish I had a copy. I have it sitting on the counter. It's the one I'm missing, but if you want it, send me an email. I'll send you the copy. All right, looked at 8th grade. Same thing. Well, I hear, well, what about Australia? What about Canada? We were ahead of them also. North Carolina was ahead of those two things. We're doing well. All right, so where's the education going? I'm going to let you ask that question. I would like to tell you one other thing. When I campaigned, I said the thing I see, and I hope you agree with me, is we need something for the students that will not go to college. And we need some type of career academy, vocational education. It is growing legs. I can't say a whole lot, but it's being discussed. Our commissioners are part of it. As you know, our new legislature has said there's got to be something else, and they're actually talking 2 tracks. The college prep track, and we'll call it the career vocational track. With that in mind, there's a lot of discussion about career academy, and I want you to dream with me, and I'm pushing this hard. If we could have a high school built, and it doesn't matter where, but let's say Craven County, let's say north of New Bern, because that's where Industrial Park is, and there's a career academy, and it may even be somewhere in the vicinity of that Craven 30 we keep hearing about. And suddenly there's a high school that gives both a full high school degree as well as a vocational certification. Let's take it a step further. If we had a medical clinic that said, hey, I'd like to be in this complex, and now our nurses' aides, our technicians, our lab technicians could go over there for their internship and their certification. And then Cummings Diesel says, hey, this is pretty good. We'd like to put a plant in here between New Bern and Kinston. We'll take any of those you can produce in the mechanic phase, and we'll train them, we'll use them, and you can see where it goes. I didn't invent this. I read a web. I used to live in New England. Massachusetts has had it for many years, and they have something called the Tri-County Academy. 15 vocational careers. And if you pull it up, Tri-County Academy, Massachusetts, you'll see the students saying, this is the greatest thing that's ever happened. I will end this by saying, just because you go to this high school and because you get a vocational degree does not mean you can't go to college. They may miss a math course or an English course that may be taught differently. They have to take that. But it certainly is that opportunity. So I'm excited about some things I see happening. That was my pitch, and I know you do have questions.
Okay. I hear you on the vocational and college prep classes. I'm just curious why they have to be in the vocational students have to be in a separate school. Why not have them in the same school? When I was back in school, which was a long time ago, but I still remember, we had vocational track, we had college prep, and I think we had a third, but I don't remember exactly.
Business, yes, there was.
Business, okay. About the same, aren't we? So anyway, they were in the same school. And by the way, our school, to brag a little bit, the school I went to was one of the top 10 in the nation at that time. It's not that way now, but it was. It was a good school. And part of the reason it's not as good, in my opinion, is it's too politically correct. I'm really not a politically correct person because I have run into so many people when I lived in California. So many people were PC and they were so dumb. I'm sorry, they were just plain dumb. When my husband registered to vote out there, the gal making out the form asked him where he was born. He said Washington, D.C., and she said, "Where's that?" And and believe it or not, I ran into a gal in Havelock at my vet's who asked the same question, and I asked her where she's from, and she said California. And I'll just say, I see things happening here that are somewhat like California, and it's not going to help. It's not going to help anybody. And in my personal opinion, there are people who want to dumb down America. And one of them was a former president. And they like dumb people just like, I'm sorry, but a long time ago, certain people were told they weren't supposed to learn to read or write. It was against the law for certain people. And there was a reason for that. And there's a reason today why some people aren't encouraged to read or write. It's because of the desire to control. And I don't approve of it, but I'm still not politically correct, I will say again. I don't like the fact that too many students, and I've had them tell me that, well, my daughter, first class she took in education was called multiculturalism, and the minority teacher said to her, to the whole class, she came home crying, the white men are the reason for all the wrongs that are happening in our country and in our world. And I've had students say,
Let me try to answer your first part of your question.
yeah, I want to know.
The first part of your question, as I recall, was why would it be a separate school?
Yeah.
Why won't it be embedded in the high school?
It would
We have
make
been actually been there, and
And
the decision
financially.
through the legislature was to separate the high school and the career courses. We still teach what we call career technical education in the high school, but this will be a much more formal.
But-
Because the community college has it, it was literally separated from the two, and the dollars weren't there. There is now a new effort to say, let's try something like a career high school. My real answer to why we need to do it that way is our high schools are crowded. It would be wonderful, I'll use New Bern High School as an example, to take a certain population, whether it's 500 students or whatever, and move them there. It won't necessitate us talking about that additional high school we need to build somewhere. It
But-
also would put them in the same, I don't want to say it wrong, but in the same environment where every student there has the same interests, the same aspirations, and hopefully the same desire. When they are mixed with the different programs that are in the high school, they don't always, the oil and water don't always mix the same way. It also would allow us to channel all the courses for career technical, vocational, to include teaching that English and so on. They may be taught by the high school faculty that goes over and teaches 1 week there or afternoon classes. That part has not been formalized. But that is the intent, and to answer your question, it has worked so well in other states, it's worth our looking at. And I use Massachusetts as and if it's not offered in the high school, whether it's at New Bern High School or whether it's at the Career Academy, they now have it online. And you'll get the same credit, and depending on the level you take, you can also get college credits. So there's a lot more opportunity there, no matter which high school you're in.
Well, I've taken online classes, and I'll tell you right now, like especially a language, you do not learn it the right way. We had Japanese exchange students, same
I
thing.
understand.
They came, they could not speak the language correctly.
But back to my answer, I think having a career academy, the students will be more motivated and they share something in common, and that's desired.
And the expense, will it be?
Well, we were probably gonna need a new high school in the very near future. West Craven is overcrowded, Newbern High School is overcrowded, and I use the Tri-County experience because I could see Lenore County and Jones County perhaps using our facility, giving us dollars, and hopefully you'll find that, obviously there is a startup cost, but hopefully you'll find that whatever the state has given us and what we need for a future high school, it'll be covered. But I can't talk the dollars yet because we don't know, and it's not been provided as provision yet. Yes.
Danny, to Verna and Carolina Colors notwithstanding, has there been any discussion at the city level about future annexation over here on this side of the river?
If you're talking about annexation on this side of the river, the question has come up to me several times, why doesn't the city annex the James City area? Steve, you can help me with this, but the legislature passed a law, called a law, that we will not annex anybody who doesn't want to be annexed, number one. We will not have, we cannot force annex. So if a community were to come to the city and say, we want to be annexed, we would certainly look at that. But we can't go to any area and say there's 100 homes in a community and they want to, we can't go and annex that unless it's their desire. So we haven't really discussed it. The only annexation that's happened since I've been an alderman have been when developers have come to us and said, we want to develop an area, we need water, we need sewer, will you annex us? Of course, we've got the water and we've got the sewer, and that increases our tax base and becomes good business for us. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but that's the law right now. Could that change someday? I guess it could. There was a lot of, and Steve, if I understand it correctly, there was a lot of, must have been a lot of rumor at one point that the city was going to annex James City, and the people really got up in arms and basically got the legislature to pass that law. So that's where we stand today.
So you can assure us reasonably that there are no behind closed door discussions going on about trying to stop the damn city?
Not that I've been part of.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't see that ever happening. As Denny said, I guess it was 20 or 25 years ago, there was a local bill introduced in the General Assembly, and I can't remember if it was John Nichols or what was his name? Gerald Anderson, they were represented. One of the two of them introduced a local bill that prohibited the city of Newbern from doing forced annexation in Township 7. And this is the only area of the city, I think, that is true. Now, the General Assembly passed a bill in the last session, I think, that said if the city wants to annex an area that I think it's 80% of the people that reside within that area have to want to be annexed. So they just can't.
It's not a 51.
They took that away from cities in the last session, I'm pretty sure.
I think that's right. Let me just add one other thing. Some of you may have heard of this before, but there's a term called ETJ. It stands for extra. I have to correct myself because sometimes I think extraterrestrial, but it's extraterritorial jurisdiction. If you leave Newbern going south on 17, where the city limit stops for 1 more mile, those homes and businesses are subject to the rules of the city from a standpoint of if somebody wants to build a building, they've got to follow the city's rules on signage, landscaping, parking, et cetera, et cetera. That does not occur on this side of the river. And that is a possibility at some point that we would, and the goal would be to improve the landscape on this side of the river. And I think you know what I'm talking about. Buildings with roofs caved in and whatnot. The county has no ability at this point to do anything about that. If it were in the city, we could. So we aren't going to annex it, but it's possible that there could be at some point a movement to make that as long as it's within a mile of the city, we could create an extraterritorial jurisdiction. I don't know what is required to do that, but that would only be done in the only attempt to do that would be to further development, to help development increase and progress. So that's just something, the ETJ is the only thing that we could do on this side of the river.
Do they pay tax?
That wouldn't affect taxes.
You not pay taxes.
No, no taxes.
And I'll follow up on that, Denny. If I'm not mistaken, the general assembly is got some
Involved in
people-
that too?
Well, there's some folks that are going to or have introduced a bill that would stop cities from having that
Okay,
authority.
that could be. I haven't heard that, but that's possible.
And I
But that
think-
wouldn't affect anybody's taxes. That would only affect how they, and it wouldn't, people would be grandfathered if they're already there, but it would improve the future, I guess, as far as landscaping and signage and so on.
Gentleman in the back, you had a question, sir.
Yes, my name is Melvin Cooper, and I'm in the education system. And to kind of answer your question pertaining to the two separate, about having separate schools, you would need to. It's not like when you and I was in school where a person could, yeah, I'm up there, where a person could, you know, be in a vocational education track versus a person on the college track. The kids today, they are awful. They are
I can't say
awful.
that.
And the reason why I can say that, because I'm the ISS coordinator for a middle school, which I handle behavior kids. They are awful. They would take them kids and destroy them. Because they would be on there, oh, you in vocational school, oh, you a dummy. That's how, so it would have to be separate.
Could I interject? The only thing I tell you, I do not see the students going to vocational school as dummies. I see them having a skill or desire to achieve in that
And I'm not
area.
saying they
Some
are,
of
but
them.
our kids today are not the kids of yesterday.
But thank you, I agree with. I
They are not.
understand.
They are totally different.
Yes.
That's why some schools have to have uniforms.
I mentioned all of
Because kids who cannot afford the clothes that they wear get ragged on by the kids who can. So it's best to have uniforms. Also the mere fact that everybody is uniformly coming to school in the same type of dress. I'm glad to hear that there's a possibility of a vocational school because it is needed.
I agree.
It is needed. Everybody is not college material. Why it ever went that way, I'm not really sure, but it certainly is good to see that they may be coming back to that because there are people who are in need. I see kids every day who come in and in 7th grade and reading on the 3rd grade level. Those kids, I mean, you can bring them up, but in all likelihood, they are not college tracking. They're not on that proficiency to be going to college.
But they could be an
Yeah.
auto mechanic.
All, yeah.
I've got
Or a welder.
I know a guy, Melvin, that, he got a partial scholarship to Campbell University in computer, code writing, computer technology. He dropped out after a year because he liked fixing cars. He's been working over at Trent Olds now for about 7, 8 years and, makes really good money. I'm
And there's a
talking
possibility that you throw a kid in a
$70,000,
vocational, vocational program and they decide to step up. I'm not trying to down any kid that's in a vocational school. What I'm just saying is that it is good for them to know that there is another possibility. When they get the kids the EOG testing, there are kids that literally get sick the day of the, right there on the testing day where they just look at that book and start looking at questions and they throw up. Because probability they're looking at something that they missed in probably being out of school or having to be in my classroom, and all they're getting sent down to them is a worksheet to work while they're in my classroom, and then all of a sudden here it is, they thrown with an end of grade testing booklet, and they start realizing, I never had this before. And then sometimes they literally get sick.
May I comment on that one last thing? And I'll give you an example. And this goes back. I have a very close friend. He's a Rotarian with me. He grew up in Mass, and that's where I heard this. He went to the vocational school, but he also went to college, went into the Army, made full colonel, and they also sent him to Oxford University. So somewhere he got the basics that made him successful. It's still out there.
And just one thing,
Thank you.
I know our last superintendent was head against it in terms of alternative school for behavior. But when you got 30 kids in a classroom or more, and you have several in there that are just literally every day coming in and causing a problem, that takes away the effectiveness of the kids who wants to learn.
We would not want the vocational school to be an alternative school for behavior.
No, that's another different school. You're talking about another,
That's
you're
totally
talking
different.
about another school there altogether.
While we're talking about schools a little bit, let me tell you where we are from the county standpoint. The county builds schools and maintains the schools. The General Assembly, of course, I think it was in 1998, they increased the corporate sales tax. And the portion of the increase in North Carolina was to go towards the county for building schools, for capital projects on school, not just building them, but for additions, roofs, and that type of stuff. They, and in Craven County, I think that was about, we were getting about $800,000 a year. When the state started having some financial problems about 5 years ago, they said they were gonna take it away for that year, but it hadn't come back in. It's not gonna come back in all likelihood. You know, the state doesn't have it to give back. So that's gone. And also the education lottery fund that the state put together 4 or 5 years ago, about half of that money, I believe, was supposed to go to counties for building and maintaining schools and everything. A good portion of that's gone away, probably $300,000 or $400,000 a year. Well, the county had borrowed some money and built a new Creekside Elementary School and done quite a few improvements to some of the other schools with the intention of using that money to retire the debt. Well, that's gone away, so we've had to scrounge around and find money from other sources in order to meet our debt service on the schools. And the next 3 years especially were going to be a challenge to us. We were expected to go in the hole about $1.3 or $1.4 million over the next 3 or 4 years from the money that we had identified previously, knowing that the ADM is what they call it, the corporate sales tax and the lottery funds were going to be part of this fund, and it's gone now, but we're going in the hole and we're having using funds from other revenue in order to retire the debt. But I think in 2 or 3 years we're going to be in pretty good shape for that, David.
I hope so.
After we get some of this debt service off of us.
One thing I don't know is anything about schools. I'll be the first one to admit that. But I just want to give you a couple of examples, and that is our grandson graduated 2 years ago this month from New Bern High School as valedictorian of New Bern High School. And he's been in North Carolina now for 2 years, and he's had straight A's. And our other grandson graduated 13th in that same class, and he's been at Virginia Tech for 2 years, and he's got 1 B, and that was in cooking. But in all of his medical preparation courses, he's a straight A student. And I say that because I went to New Bern High School 7 or 8 years ago and did a 2-day class for some kids that were at risk of dropping out. These were 15, 16-year-old kids, and I was invited to come and kind of give them a little, hopefully a dose of reality. And one young man sitting right in front of me, I noticed was having trouble staying awake during this class. And after class, I went up and chatted with him a little bit, and I said, "What's going on?" He said, "The stuff going on at my house," he said, I haven't gotten any sleep in the last 2 nights. So there's your contrast, and I don't care what the teachers or schools do, this poor kid didn't have a chance.
Sure.
And yet my grandson's got plenty of support and preparation to get through school. My other comment would be that I've got, many of you or most of you know that I own businesses that repair automobiles. The United States today is 100,000 automobile technicians short. 100,000. And when I started in the business, you learned to fix cars by watching Joe over here or Bill over here, and you took things off and put things on. our #1 technician at our New Bern store went to Craven Community College, graduated with all the automobile technical stuff, and he's been with us since we opened. So he's been with us almost 8 years, and he's 26, and he's the highest paid employee in the store other than my son and myself. So that's what the right VOTEC education can do for you, and he can fix anything. He's smart as can be, but he didn't do particularly well in high school. But when he went to Craven, he blossomed because he got into what he wanted to do, and I mean, he understands the technical, the electrical, the check engine light, all that kind of stuff. I mean, he just fixes it like that, and that's.
And I have to comment on this. I recall a conversation months ago where we were talking about a technical, a career academy, and Denny said, you get them the basic skills, show me they have the aptitude, I'll take them and I'll finish them up.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about. I'm also going to give you another.
And we've got a Craven Community College auto tech student right now that's just getting started, and he's working at our store, and he's kind of an apprentice, and hopefully he'll move along, and as he gets through his classes, he'll get better and better. So, and that's ideal if they can be working in their field while they're taking these kind of courses. You don't want a kid that, we've had several that were graduates but had no hands-on, and they're not very good at that point. If they can be working while they're going to school, it's magic. It really is. And a kid that, and putting him into a mainline education is of no value. He isn't going to go to college.
And Denny, I'm going to follow up on that with just saying that I didn't say that Craven County supported the community college, but it does. We fund all the debt service for the buildings and the maintenance and the repairs and custodial and security and stuff like that.
So that's another part of your county taxes.
Yeah, it's about $4 million, but I just want to say that the community colleges in North Carolina have been very successful, and I hear from a lot of different people, even across the state outside of Craven County, that this one does, I would say, really good work from training engineers to sending people off to a 4-year school.
But David, these kids could be having some of that in high school,
Yes.
not wait until they get to
Head
community
Start,
college.
yes. Exactly.
Yeah, I want to just now veer to the city alderman here pertaining to James City and the fee that was assessed to the residents of James City, something like $800, and they did break it down, or maybe even more, because it's coming to like $80. I think it's $80 a month for the next 3 years for water, improvement of the sewer system or the water system, and the city has taxed the residents of James City with that. I made a phone call, and basically pretty much all I could get was that, you know, they needed it because the city did not want to no longer absorb the fee of having to replace the septic tanks, or not septic tank, but the pump system.
The pump system, you're talking
Yeah,
about the
pump
septic.
system for the septic. Mhm.
I'll try to answer, I think I understand your comment that the people that live in the county that are on the old county sewer system that was bought by the city, how many years ago?
1990, I think.
Okay, so 20 years ago.
2000.
Okay, 13 years ago, the city bought the county's septic system. And that system was called the STEP system. That stands for septic tank, something, something.
Can't help you now.
The homes that were on the county system have a septic tank. Only the liquid goes into the line and gets pumped to that big lake across airport.
Lagoon, they call them.
Lagoon, they call it. If you fly over, there's a big lake kind of behind the airport there. Those pumps in those septic systems have to be replaced about every 10 years. So the city was absorbing that. And a year ago or 2 years ago, there was a additional fee on all the homes that have that STEP system. Was it $8 a month? Does that sound right?
$833.
I want to say $7 or $8 a
He
month.
says 833.
$8.33.
Sounds pretty close.
That's about right. And that goes into a fund to replace these pumps because they do fail after about 8 or 10 years. So I think that's what we're
Yeah,
talking
that's
about.
what, and my concern was that, James City, Port of James City has a very elderly population, and to put such a burden on some of them sometimes is just, I mean, $8 for someone may not seem a lot, but when you're on a fixed
Oh, I
income, you
understand.
you have medicine that you have to buy, then you have to decide whether or not take that $8, which is already in your city bill anyway, and you got to pay it.
Understand? That's
If you
$100.
don't- If you don't pay your,
$100 a year.
yeah, if you don't pay your little city bill because you didn't have that $8, your lights get turned
Yeah,
off.
understand.
And that's a concern.
Yeah.
I wanted to come back to something I said earlier, and that it starts off with a compliment to Steve, and the reason that we're here tonight is because we are all, and Danny, we're all working together for the same cause, and it's how can we make Craven County, and in my case, Craven County schools better. And there has been a definitely change in atmosphere, or it's my perception, of us working together, the county commissioners, the school board. We know we're seeking the same common purpose. And so that's a compliment to how we're communicating. They go to our meetings, we try to go to their meetings, but most of all, we're talking. And I think we have a future together. The other comment, and it goes back to this academy, but it's more than that. We just had and I may need some help on this, the economic assessment study, and it's in its ongoing early phase. But they made two comments. One is we have a shortage of blue-collar skilled workers. Again, that's something this academy could do. And the other is, they did talk about our potential, and they even mentioned, and you may hear more about it, a career academy, because they see that as filling that need right here in Craven County. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I'd like to get back to education,
Okay.
and particularly Common Core. I'm concerned about it, especially in the lower classes, because it sounds, from what little I know about it, it sounds like they are making the student, they're not separating classes from the special kids for from the lower kids. So everything's the same. They are sort of dumbing down the whole group so that everyone moves along at the same rate. Is that not the case?
Can I come, first of all, I haven't seen anything in Common Core to do that. Now, that may be a philosophy of the school, and I haven't seen anything from our Department of Public Instruction saying, do that. There is an interest, and there has been a movement, and it was called the unifying example of how having an exceptional child come into the classroom and learn from the regular classroom, if you will. That move, but they are still getting their special time. The Exceptional Children's Program has its own unique funding. It's still there. If I was going to say, if anything, there is a movement to bring the gifted and let them work and bring up. Now, will it bring them down? I can't answer that. But the gifted program, which is getting a new look, is how they can make them stronger, with the gifted teacher also coming into the classroom. So I actually think there's more opportunity to bring the lower end up and still keep the quality where we are.
Just from what little I have read about it, it seemed like they were keeping math especially at a very simplified level.
I would love to ask my daughter, who teaches third grade in Havelock, if she's seen it. I do know they still have their Exceptional Children Program in that school and in Havelock, and I'm very comfortable with Tucker Creek in the middle school. They still have an Exceptional Children's Program, and in particular, the math child will go to math in the regular classroom, and then will go to his specials class where they will reinforce what he or she tried to learn in that math class.
Well, how about things like multiplication tables, learning those? Aren't they higher level than they used to be?
It's required for all students. Will some of the exceptional children achieve it at the same stage and the same level, but it's still required. That part, and I invite you, and I'll share this with you, there is a curriculum website that you can read and see where the curriculum is and what they expect us to be. And if anything, we have accelerated where we expect our math students to be in the 7th and 8th grade.
It seemed like this math, or the multiplication tables weren't required until 5th grade.
My wife made that comment. She said, do you know that the child actually isn't ready for and it's really mixed fractions in that part. They moved that. The multiplication tables, I think, are still where they were. But mixed fractions have been moved to another grade level, and it's because the mind doesn't conceptually handle that concept. As long as they get it by 6th, 7th, or 8th grade, they're going to have it when they get that next level of math, which is integrating the math and the math concepts. Carol's, my wife, is the one you really need to talk to.
Right,
She
I know.
is so positive on what's happening, and I want to give you an example. And this is a middle school math problem, and instead of saying solve this equation, it says for each linear equation in the table, select whether the equation has no solution, one solution, or infinitely many solutions, a higher order of thinking, and that's where Common Core is going. And we're only doing, and I take the moment because it's getting a lot of misinformation, Common Core in North Carolina is only math and language arts. It's not history, it's not science, and so on. Everything I've seen says it's going to be more rigorous. And there is an article, it was published by Dr. Brown, who is our head of curriculum for Craven County Schools. It's wonderful. She talks about what it does, what it doesn't do, and the website for reading the curriculum and seeing where it is. The curriculum is actually just being established. And from everything we saw for this year, they said, teach the same curriculum, only add the rigor. And I just share that. We will learn together. Yes.
Regarding the Common Core situation, it is a federal program.
It's a state program. Our state adopted it, and we would,
Adopted.
so it is, instead of saying federal, let's say it's a national program of which states have agreed to share the same standard and same curriculum, so that when my student comes in from Arizona in 9th grade algebra, and he transfers to Havelock High School, he doesn't have to take a remedial refresher course, and that's what's been happening, because they were on the same sheet of music or page for math. And so
But
that
it
is.
is a federal program.
Federal,
National.
federal pays.
I'll go with national.
States that take it. They
There
give
are
you a large
assisted, yes,
amount
and
of
this
money.
goes
You don't
back
have
to,
take it.
this goes back to race with the top. There were dollars, and
Yeah.
they are tied together. And with just what we said with the economy, you take the dollars so that you don't reduce the number of teachers, increase the size of the classroom. I am still, and when I ran, I said, I support Common Core. I am because of what I've seen, and I think it's still a very similar curriculum, but a much higher and more difficult rigor. The other one, which I didn't bring an example on, instead of saying, look at this paragraph and correct the punctuation, it says, take this first right of a paragraph and correct it and make it stronger. It's making the students think at a higher level, and that's really what you're going to see in Common Core.
Well, can you give us kind of a brief rundown on exactly what it means to look at the Common Core program?
Common Core means, and there are only 3 states, I believe, that did not subscribe to it. Even the Department of Defense and their schools are under Common Core. But it means that all of our states can be compared to each other. We can look at Pennsylvania and New York and Ohio and see how we are comparing with them, much like I mentioned the TIMS. We can also share curriculum across state lines, and when the students transfer, either within the state, other counties, or out of state, we'll be on the same type of curriculum. For us, it is just math and just English level. And that's the key, is it gives a commonality. And as a middle school counselor, I can't tell you how difficult it was when a student came in and they were behind. And I use Arizona because we have quite a Marine population comes from Arizona. If Arizona teaches, and I'll say mixed fractions, at the beginning of the 5th grade, and we teach it in the 4th grade, and by the time they arrive after Christmas in the 4th grade, we've passed through it and they've never had it. Can they catch up? So now we're all going to be on sort of the same timing, structure, and curriculum. It really is an asset.
And you believe that this is a step up and not a dumb down?
I'm going to, in fact, I'll invite you to read this. That was in the newspaper, you probably read it. And yes, I will not accept, and Carol in particular will not accept dumb down. We are actually, and let me throw another one. If you read the newspaper on Sunday a month ago, Wade County said, we are concerned now that the Common Core math is so rigorous that our gifted students may not be able to take the level they were taking in the 7th grade. They were taking 8th grade math. They may have to step down to be able to keep up with the math requirements. It's that much more rigorous. And it's a new concept of how you think, how you look for solutions. It's not what is the answer, it's how did you solve it, and is there another way to solve it?
But John being the program.
Our budget is going up probably $1.5 million, but we're not gonna raise taxes. And so why are we not able to? Because we're gonna be able to cut expenses in, across the board in some cases. Seem to be doing more with less, I would say. I can't even hardly think of an employee that we've added on in the last few years, with the exception of the tax department's gonna get a new one because we changed our tax valuations from 8 years to 6 years. And in doing so, we just didn't have the staff to go through the process to do it in 6 years. So we'll have another person there. Hold it, and I'll get with you. So I feel pretty good about it. I do. I would say that, at the local level, that you can control things better than you can at the state or federal level, particularly at the federal level. The federal government is so massive, it's, you know, the bigger the organization, whether it's the federal government, Army, Department of Defense, you know, the bigger something gets, the slippage seems to be larger.
Let me just add that many of you probably have, maybe all of you have a budget at your home. You've worked in budgets in business or budgets in whatever job you did. The one difficult thing about budgeting that they're going through, and we are as well right now, is that we're starting right now, we're working on a budget that's going to start in July and go through next June. And we have to predict what the sales taxes are going to look like for the next 15 months out or 14 months out. We know what the property taxes are, but the sales tax makes up a big piece of the city's budget. And in 2008, 9, 7, 8, 9, when the economy went like this and people stopped buying cars and other big ticket items, the sales tax that we collected as a city went down dramatically. Think about it. The other thing, and this is one of my pet peeves, is that $200 million every year leaves Craven County to go to Greenville and to Jacksonville and to Raleigh and et cetera, to be spent rather than being spent here. And that's not the consumer's fault. That's because we need to attract better businesses, stores, et cetera, so people don't feel the need to go out of town to spend their money. But if you go buy a new car or a new sofa or whatever in Greenville, that's tax dollars that this county and this city are losing. And that's the hard thing to manage. The other thing I would like to mention is that the city reduced, sounds insignificant, but we reduced 2 payroll positions starting July 1 because the county is going to do our tax collecting. We're still going to get the tax, but they have a tax department, we have a tax collection department. Both do the same thing. We got, our city manager and county manager got together, and it was precipitated because our tax collector, the lady who was in charge, retired. And we advertised for a new tax collector, and we really didn't get a good candidate. So we went to the county and said, could we pay you to collect our taxes? So we've now been able to reduce 2 people, and with no additional, no loss of income, a very minor amount of expense. I think it's saving us $85,000 in the next fiscal year. That would not have happened 3 or 4 years ago because the city and the county didn't talk to each other, literally. And that, I'm not talking Steve, I'm talking about the city manager, the county manager were like 2 separate islands. And today, these guys, they have a new county manager, we have a new city manager within the last couple of years, and they're working together, and we're looking at other areas where we could combine, instead of paying double, combine departments or combine other areas. And I just thought I'd mention that what we're doing tonight, I don't think happened very, very often before. And we've had numerous meetings between aldermen and commissioners to discuss this type of thing. And I think as we go down the road, we'll see more of that. We need to, because it's silly to have duplicate expenses doing the same thing. And we haven't really talked about anything specific, but a friend of mine, kind of shirt-tail relative in Elizabeth City, the county and the city just combined their parks. Instead of having a county park department and a city park department, they got one park department. They eliminated a manager, and they eliminated some mowers and some this and some of that, and now they got one department doing all the parks in the county. That's the kind of thing we need to look at as a city and a county as we go down the road. How do we eliminate duplicate expenses?
Did that answer, you have anything specific, John? Okay, Melvin was first, I think, and then we'll get to everybody else.
Back to that sewer pump thing. So in 3 years, is the city not gonna take that money out any longer? The $8.
I would think that's gonna be an ongoing thing.
Now, the letter I received, it said it would be over a 3-year period
Okay.
for taking
I'm
that
not sure I
8.
understood the question.
Hey, and the question was, the fee on the pump that.
Fee on the pump that we're
he said
talking
that's
about
going
previously.
away in 3 years.
I don't know. I don't have an answer.
Why don't you
I don't
get his
think it's
number?
gonna go away,
Melvin,
because the pumps are gonna continue to wear out on down the road. By the way, there's another piece to this puzzle, and that is we're also replacing septic tanks. The tanks that originally were put in weren't the current technology, and a lot of times when we get heavy rain, a lot of rain would get into those tanks, and it really overwhelmed the system. So one by one, we are not only changing those pumps, but we're changing tanks. And that's not part of that $8. That's, I'm just saying separately.
and that's the way that I think you mentioned about the city and the counties, and you're just one city in Creighton County. We've
Right,
got
right.
8 others, but you're the biggest, you're the city, you know, the county seat. But we gave, or helped the city of New Bern replace quite a few of these old inefficient tanks that they had before with the new tanks that are sealed and don't have the water infiltration that ends up having to be treated just like sewer does
Yeah.
that comes from your house. And the county applied for an economic development type of grant and helped the city with that. And that's kind of a win-win because it enables the city to put potentially more folks in Township 7 that have these failing septic tanks back on the system, or add new residents.
New customers.
Yeah, new customers.
I'll get your phone number and I'll get you an answer.
Thank you.
Why don't you?
Okay, new line. The issue is the drawbridge. I read in the paper about the schedule that they're gonna have, and mainly during rush hour, they're gonna have. What about, a lot of places have, especially on the weekends, we've had times when the drawbridge will open every 20 minutes to let a boat through on a Saturday afternoon. Is it possible that eventually we'll go to a set schedule every hour on the half hour to avoid the up and down so much?
Is it possible? Yes, it's been discussed. The drawbridge at this point is still under the state's,
Domain.
it's a word I'm thinking of. The state has never turned the bridge over to us, thank goodness. That's all I'm gonna say. We're paying for a small piece of the maintenance requirement and the inspection. But I think it's safe to say that if the city is given the bridge at some point, or we take over the bridge, we're gonna look at that as an option. I also had somebody bring up to my attention, and again, it isn't ours at this point, but if, that the bridge operator sits in there and sometimes sits in there for many, many hours and does nothing, but he's gotta be there. Apparently there's some new technology available that the bridge could be operated from a remote location. Maybe a location that's, take the fire department where they're up and awake anyway, maybe they could via camera. So we've discussed that, and I think I was with a friend once bringing a sailboat up from Florida, and we went through a number of bridges on the intercoastal as we came up. In some cases, they weren't gonna, if we weren't there by 6 a.m., we were gonna wait till 9 in Charleston and some of the bigger cities, because they don't want to disrupt rush hour. These are bridges that carry heavy, heavy traffic. So I would say that, and again, I can only speak for myself, that if the bridge is passed on to us, we'll certainly look at some alternatives to what's being done now.
I'll just give you an example. I guess it was last summer, we were stopped on the bridge, you know, to let the boat traffic go. We got through and we caught a red light on, you know, by the convention center. And before that light turned green, the bridge was going up again.
So that shouldn't happen.
No, it shouldn't.
If it goes up and you don't get through, then you'll have to wait a half hour or whatever to get the next opening. I totally agree with that.
And then everybody can plan on that.
I've never heard,
Everybody can
it's the first complaint I've heard of something that frequent.
Yeah.
If I'm correct, Topsail has a schedule, and the boats wait in queue until that scheduled time, and it's understood, I think, many places.
You might also be aware, maybe you aren't, that if we get this bridge thrust upon us, and for lack of a better word, we'll be the only city in North Carolina that operates a bridge that goes up and down. All the rest are operated by the state, and we hope that we don't want it. Needless to say, we don't want it.
Do we have the opportunity to give input to the state while they're still under control of the bridge?
We could give them input. I don't know whether they'll pay any attention to it or not. I made a note of it, and I'll inquire. Yeah, because I agree. At the most, if it goes up and down, it ought to wait 30 minutes before it goes up and down again. For no other reason than it'll wear out faster if it's going up and down that often. Wayne, the same subject, or?
No, different
Oh.
subject. It's okay. Just a curiosity question on this annexation thing. Carolina Colors, Taberna, are they city islands surrounded by county, or is there a law that says there has to be some contiguous piece of land, be it as narrow as a railroad track, to connect the city?
I'm going to give you what I believe is the answer that's accurate. I'm going to say I'm 95% sure. When Taberna was conceived, the city, Weyerhaeuser came to the city and said, we'd like to build a development and we would like it to be in the city. We want city services. The people we're going to market this to are going to want fire, sewer, police, etc. Because they're mostly going to be coming from retirees, to a great extent coming from areas where they're used to those services. There was and is a law that allows what they call a satellite annexation. Okay? And Taberna was a satellite annexation. It was not connected by land to the city of Newburgh. However, to get the Carolina Colors development approved, there had to be a connection. And if you look at a map of the city today, and I have one if you want to look at it, I could have brought it, I didn't think to. There is a connection now all the way from the river to Taberna. There is a strip of land that is in the city. It required them to annex Arthur Farms. You know where that is? Kind of behind the airport. Go around the airport and get on Bryce's Creek Road and start to go around, heading out toward the Bryce's Creek Bridge. And go. On the left, there's a farm called Arthur Farms. It's now in the city. That allowed the connection, which allowed Carolina Colors, because Carolina Colors was too far to be what they call a satellite.
Okay.
Answer your question?
Yes.
And I can show you the map, and you can see there's a little strip of land. It gets wider and skinnier until you get to Taberna, and then when you get to Taberna, then you're connected to Creekside, and, well, excuse me, Creekside's on this side. You're connected to Bryce's Crossing, to Longleaf, to Carolina Colors. All those are all in a row, and it all stays in.
All part of the city.
It's all part of the city.
Is that all of Arthur's land? I pretty much think I have an idea of that piece. There's also that little water reservoir in the back end of the airport. So are you saying that Arthur Farm, why it then starts narrowing around that pond and then connect Central? Because you're also looking at, I can't think of the gentleman's name, but I'm sure that's some of his property as well.
I'm not sure.
He's right next to the airport.
Yeah, the farmer, Claude Hall.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Yeah, I think.
Because a large tract of that land from beginning of the road and further back onto the airport, because airport ran into a problem when it wanted to try to extend the runways and et cetera, because he had that land. So
I'm not sure
how's
how-
the connection made?
I'm not sure, but I do know I can show you on the map that
It
there
is
is
there.
there's a strip of land that connects all the way. And I don't know who owns it or who doesn't own it, but it's in the city.
Yeah. Speaking of the airport, if you don't mind.
You keep interjecting, huh?
I started off by telling you 4 things that the county does. There's probably a lot more they wouldn't like to see. Josh, you know what I'm talking about. Do I think there needs to be zoning? I think there needs to be probably limited zoning, at least on the corridor. Where you're going from James City down to the end of the well, into Havelock, I guess you would say. Why would I want to do that? Because the lack of zoning is what's caused that mess in James City. Well, really from James City to DeBarn. The lack of any type of zoning caused that bottleneck up there. With the right planning and the right zoning, I think that probably could have been avoided to an extent. And if there is gonna be some come in Township 7, it's gonna be a lot more limited than what you would see in the city of Newton. Sure. Where they're gonna tell you how tall your flowers can grow. And, you know, how regulatory, that's just the nature of cities. I mean, that's what they do. And counties in the south particularly just never went there. You had dogs, you know, running all over the place, and you had a trailer here and an industrial facility here. It's just the way that, you know, the south was, and it's not as bad as it used to be, but it still is too. And if we did have county zoning, I don't think you'd get it passed, but maybe in Township 7. There's enough city residents over here now that may support it, but in areas like in the Vanceburg area and all that, you're just not gonna get it. They don't want it. Yes, sir.
Speaking of zoning, what recourse does the county have to make someone clean up their area? Saying family member passed off and the other family members are living in Raleigh, up north, whatever, and you got all this overgrowth and stuff that really just takes the area down.
With no zoning, none, almost none, unless there's a public health hazard that I can call up the health director and say, hey, you got rats just all over this place. You know, there's really nothing you can do without zoning. I'll give you another example that I think. I've had a lady that, she worked down at the base, single lady, lives over on Garner Road. Everybody know where that is? Yep. They built a big building supply house right in front of, right behind her house. So she lived there, she's worked hard her whole life, she's, you know, bought a little house and paid for it, and now her life is interrupted all the time by trucks going in and out. All times, the building supply companies, they have trucks going in early, and they have them coming out late, and the noise, and really the storm runoff from that area caused her some minor flooding issues. So that, if you had some type of zoning in Township 7, you could have probably prohibited that. I'm not anti-growth. I've been a small businessman since not on my own, independent businessman since 1982, and so I'm not anti-growth, but at the same time, there's certain things that are going on that are problematic. Yes, sir.
Steve, I wanted to get back to the camp. Apologize for being late coming in, but the education question seems to be critical for continuing to take care of our needy children. And it seems to me that there might be some changes in the state budget, which may or may not impact them. I don't know how that's going to impact the county. But my concern is how do you see any possibility of the legislation passing that? How would that impact our elementary school areas? It seems to me K through 5, K through 6 is just critical. We've got kids that need to learn. I was fortunate enough to have to work with one that got up at 6 o'clock in the morning, cleaned the house, and we saw him at 3:30, 4 o'clock still going to school. And that isn't the way I grew up. And are we going to have the same number of teachers, same number of associates? Is the student ratio going to stay the same if the student population stays the same?
The best answer I can give you. It's already changing. It is evolving.
Okay, thank
A
you.
year or so ago, they started discontinuing the number of what they call teacher assistants. As I understand today, there'll be teacher assistants in K1 and 2. but not in 3. My daughter is a 3rd grade teacher, she has an assistant. Can she survive without an assistant? They may end up instead with, let's say, 4 3rd grades, they have 1 assistant instead of 4, and that assistant floats through and works certain times. There is a cut, but it's not just there. We've also, there's a class size mandate, which North Carolina has waived. We're still trying to stay within that class size. The ideal class size is somewhere between 15 and 20, 16 or 18. The standard right now is 25, it went up to 29. I don't know what it's gonna go, but going back when I was at Brunson, I'm sure my class size was 35 or 38. That's not the answer. The smaller the class and keeping the highly qualified teachers on board is, I'm not gonna say it's more important, but it is one of our key ingredients to successful schools. And we are concerned about losing teachers. There are many things going on in the teacher profession that does not draw them into the profession, and that's got to be addressed in time. Most of you know it, pay freeze for the last, 6 years? Beginning teachers, our teacher of the year right now is getting paid probationary beginner teacher pay. She's been teaching 6 years. If she's that good, she's gonna go somewhere else.
Well, I did look at some teacher salaries recently, maybe a week ago, across the nation, and it's pretty sad.
Yeah, it is. We're what, 47,000?
48.
I mean, just
Yeah.
the salaries.
But back to your question, we are going, and notice I say we, when I speak, I really am speaking for me.
Sure.
I can't speak for the board, but I think, and my whole priority has always been what's best for the student. And so I'm sure that the priority is always going to be, let's give them the best environment to learn, and that's both classroom size, student population, but you have to work within the budget you're given. Now, we mentioned exceptional children. Part of the exceptional children falls under a federal mandate. Will sequestration affect that federal mandate? We have an exception of the English as a second language. That's a federal program where we lose dollars there. So there are some things that we're concerned about. Will the county come forward and give us more money if we do lose those dollars? All of those are questions that have to be asked, and we don't have that answer yet.
Can I
Sure.
have a follow-up question? It deals, Steve, with more of a county issue. You helped us in Saverna get that light fixed and working many, many years ago now. Seems a long, long time. The traffic coming out of, I think it's Gardner, it's at the road before.
Yeah.
That, to me, has always seemed to have been a hazard. I would wonder if the county would ever consider working with the state to extend that road from wherever that car dealership is over to where the light is, and then making that just a right turn to avoid, improve the safety out there. I think that would be a benefit. If the county could work with the state and.
Yeah, and I have talked with DOT about these service roads before. Their position is that's up to the person that owns the land. Well, to me, I understand that point. However, the problem with that is a lot of the times the homeowner doesn't have the money to do it, or the property owner, and it's a critical issue like that. Coming out of Gardner, if you could turn left and go down Service Road and all the way to the Deverna stoplight, I think that might be a big help. But if you'll call me, Bob, I'll sit down and talk with you about that some more. I just was recently put on what's called the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization. That's a
Transportation.
Yeah, it has to do with planning and transportation, and that organization will have a little more horsepower, I think, to address that issue than I had as a county commissioner.
Let me just add on to that. We have now been approved as a metropolitan area. And that would be New Bern, Trent Woods, Vanceboro, a couple other of the smaller communities. When you add them all up, it's 50,000. And that allows us to be a metropolitan, which gives us some leverage that we didn't have before. And that's what Steve's talking about.
Let me get Jan, she's been anxious there.
There were, years ago, I heard Hal James talk about how many commissions there were. How many commissions are there, and how many people on the commissions are paid?
In Craven County, if you're talking about board positions and so on, The airport authority pays their board members. It doesn't come out of tax dollars. It doesn't come out of Craven County tax dollars. I think $100 a meeting. I think they generally meet once a month. The hospital at one time paid theirs, which does not come out of county funds. It comes out of their own source of revenue. But I don't think they do that anymore, Jan. I'm 99% sure they don't do that. An authority that isn't just Craven counties is called the Crosama Coastal Regional Waste, facility, the dump. It's a 3-county landfill, Craven, Carter, and Pamlico. They pay them a stipend of about $20. They pay a mileage. When they have the meetings in Newbern and they have to drive from Carter to Pamlico, they pay them a small amount of money there. ABC Board does get paid. Probably that's the most of any of them I know of, and that's about $1,500 a year. That's not county taxpayer money. That comes, if you're drinking liquor, I guess it's taxpayer money from that standpoint. But,
Liquor drinker money.
It doesn't come out of the property taxes, the sales tax, or anything like that. It comes out of their revenue that they generate from selling, what's a more politically correct word? Spirits. Not liquor. But they're paid about $1,500 a year, I think. Might be 17 or something like that. That's all that I can think of off the top of my head.
Well, for what it's worth, which isn't much, I have heard that the meetings that don't last that long, and to get $100 for 2 or 3 hours seems a little excessive. Have you ever?
Which one is that? The airport?
Yeah.
That you need to address that with their own board. They operate like the hospital, the airport, the
But you
Crosama.
don't, our tax dollars to the county, you don't, your budget doesn't,
No.
okay, okay.
No. And there's another good thing about the airport. They're gonna be very close to being debt-free before long. They're paying off the debt that they acquired when they built the new terminal and all. So they've done a pretty good job of managing it. And a lot of them, hey, I will say this, a lot of them spend a lot more time than you know of. They may have a meeting that may not last but a couple hours, but I can guarantee you that Bill Nauman and retired General Block and several of the other board members, they take this stuff pretty serious. I mean, that's why I think they run such a good operation. They spend a lot more time than you can imagine on some subcommittees and other things. And I can tell you that several of them, they court Delta all the time because Delta has threatened to pull them out of here several times.
And they bring revenue to our community, and that's really important, whether it's parking, concessions.
A lot of the money that comes through that airport isn't coming from our county. It's coming from surrounding counties that are coming in to use that airport. And so that's a critical issue. Wayne was next.
Steve?
Yes.
So just to clarify a moment, Carolina East Medical Center, that is a county-owned facility?
It is a county-owned facility. It operates under some kind of strange laws that that the General Assembly passed years ago. It's operated as an authority. That's a technical word if you look it up in the legal dictionaries. But basically, the county appoints the board members. The board members hires the director over there, and the director hires everybody else. There are over 2,000 employees there now. They're in very good shape financially, very good shape financially. All smaller hospitals in eastern North Carolina cannot say that. Several of them have failed. Lenore County was under dire straits a few years ago. I don't know what's happened with that. A lot of them have been bought out by the bigger facilities. What is the one in East Carolina? Trident or Vidant? Yeah. And Chapel Hill Hospital has bought out some of the other ones, that had trouble. Ours has remained strong. You may have seen in the news the other day, they're doing a $60 million addition to upgrade the emergency room, which is the original one, I think, and also when the Naval Hospital closed at Cherry Point, all their maternity patients and their critical needs patients shifted mainly to our hospital. A lot of them did. Some of them go to Carter County, but our facility offers a lot more than they do. And so it has grown. I won't tell you all their numbers, but they're more than debt-free. They're in good shape financially. Matter of fact, I don't believe they're borrowing any money to do that $60 million addition. They're paying for it out of cash out of their cash flows.
Somebody described
but
that.
To answer your question, the county owns the property, therefore they own the land on the property. We appoint the board members, but we don't get into business day to day. It's a very complicated business, and nobody on our board has the knowledge or background to run a hospital successfully.
I think half the babies born there last year were from military families. They said Cherry Point's a baby baby factory, and that has really given that hospital a boost. When it was negative that the hospital closed, the Navy hospital, but our hospital has benefited as a result.
Who was next? Yeah.
Mr. Hall, I would hope that we would look more into that Common Core. I've heard 2 different lectures on it, and I have not heard anything positive. Matter of fact, it was very, very scary. So,
I have 2 sets of articles. I would invite you to read them. To anyone who wants to talk Common Core, I would ask them, first of all, go to the North Carolina website, read what they're saying, what the structure is, and this is the first one, K-12 curriculum. It talks about you can go into math, science. Also, the article is published in the newspaper, which is very positive. And most of all, the one is the sample items and performance tasks for Common Core. All of that's online. I'm offering it to Joe and Ann as one copy, and I'd be happy to give it to you, and then we can discuss it. I believe you'll find, and I'm going to hitchhike, a lady from the North Carolina School Board Association came down, and she has spoken to Washington County and I believe Pamlico County in conjunction with their school board about Common Core, and I understood it was positively received. I obviously didn't go to it, and I'm thinking that you may see something here as far as just introducing the community. My last comment is there is a lot of misinformation. And anytime there's a change, there is a lot of misinformation. I can only give you what's published and online, and we are just implementing as we speak. So I'm the person that says until I see the implementation and the results, I'm withholding judgment. But what I've heard and what I've seen and what it can do for our students, especially for the state, I'm still positive.
Josh, is yours about education?
Yeah.
No, I'll let,
Yeah, just a quick thing, Dave.
Ask me about the calendar. So
we got all night as far as I'm concerned. If you want to stay here, I'll talk with you all night.
So ask me something easy like the calendar.
There's been a lot in the news the last several years about violence in the schools, and I wondered, particularly given the most recent cases, has your board discussed our schools and what, anything extraordinary being done to look after the kids?
We always discuss and we track all of the incidents, anything from a weapon being brought to school to student suspensions. All of those are documented and looked at for trends. I'm happy to say, and don't hold me to this, but I believe the trend is trending down. Now, whenever there is something significant, you hear about it, like a student punching out a teacher. Yes, that did happen. Those kinds of things. There are incidents, and I can't tell you what is the genesis of that behavior. I'd like to think I knew the answer, but I don't know. It can be anything from parenting, it can be anything from anger, it can be anything from learned behavior. But anyway, we do have the incidents, but Craven County is blessed that it is below the state average as far as the number of incidents in the school. And that's the best I can tell
One
you.
more question there, and then I want to introduce
Okay,
you.
Mel?
With the governor hoping to, with the Department of Transportation, spread out money equally to improve our highways, especially here in eastern North Carolina, my concern draw to where that previous governor, Beverly Perdue, held off the the highway 70 quarter commission.
Bypass,
Yeah, about the bypass coming into James City. Where are we with that?
Well, I can tell you where we are. We're nowhere. Now, I'm not on the Highway 70 Commission anymore, but I try to follow it pretty closely. They are doing a study right now, I believe, on the potential, trying to figure out if they can do a bypass. And I think I believe, I'm gonna predict what that study is gonna say is that if it can be done, and that's a big if, it won't happen in anybody's lifetime in here, except maybe this man right here. He's a little bit younger than most of them. And here's why, Melvin, because you're gonna have to go through, you're gonna have to build a bridge, number one. You're gonna have to condemn a lot of people's property in rims that they've owned since the 1700s. You're gonna have to go through the National Forest. I granted Weyerhaeuser owns part of that property. County Line Road has some footprint, but County Line Road is a minimal right-of-way. To have the type of right-of-way they want, you're gonna have 200 feet. You're gonna have to go through an area where people use extensively for hunting. People that don't have the money to join a private hunting club or have 1,000 acres of their own. I go in that area all the time walking my dogs, and in the winter there's pickup truck after pickup truck back in there. That's these guys, that's what they do. And in addition to that, you've got several endangered species of birds, and you've got the only place in the world where you've got not man-eating plants, meat-eating plants, Venus flytrap. And if you don't think that there's about probably 50 environmental groups that would litigate that from now to eternity until it was exhausted, that's one thing. Not to mention the $250 million that they're already estimated that it would cost to do that. And so let's assume that you could do that, which I'm not sure that you can. And let's assume that the money's gonna be there, which I don't believe it's gonna be there, okay? And it's gonna take 10 years to do, and let's assume that you could do it in 10 years, which I'm telling you it's gonna take 20 or 30. What are you gonna do in the meantime in this area to fix that problem? And I'm predicting that even if they built the bypass, it's not gonna fix the problem. And here's why. Do the math. I've done it. I did it years ago. You got in Jones County, if you did the count, and I think that's changed recently, but 4 years ago, the DOT told me there was 10,000 cars a day went through Jones County on Highway 70. 4 years ago, there was between 40 and pushing 50 at times, 1,000 cars a day going over the Trent River Bridge. What does that tell you? Most of that traffic is local traffic. Even if you build a bypass, you're gonna have all that congestion out there, and you're gonna have the wrecks. So there needs to be a plan B. Even if you can overcome the obstacles to build a bypass, you're gonna have to do something different. What are you gonna do different? I don't know the two things that's even remotely possible. One are to do those flyover bridges that that DOT came up with, and the other is, I'm not sure if you can do this, and nobody else is at this time, but would be to add some more lanes as you come across the bridge. Problem is, the right-of-way isn't big enough, I don't think, to do that the way it should be done. And so, I'm just telling you, I know, Melvin, that you opposed it, and a lot of people did in James City, in other areas. I don't think there's an alternative. So we can sit there and do nothing, or we can, we would have already had those flyovers built had there not been so much opposition. They'd have been built, and they will work. I guarantee you they'll work. Now, will they cause some inconvenience in the year that it takes to build them? Yes, it probably will. But the option is to do nothing, hope that they'll have a bypass built in 20 years. In the meantime, the area that's growing is out here, so you're gonna continue to have that local traffic.
But the opposition that a lot of people objected to was that again, even with the building of the bypass, like you're saying, It was only a 10-year thing. Why would you want to do that? That's only gonna sustain you for 10 years, and you gotta look at something else. Economically, I mean, financially,
We're saying 10
economically,
years.
it was not feasible. There
No,
was gonna be a large impact on the businesses that are along that corridor.
You're missing the point, though. The point is that even if you build a bypass, the traffic's still gonna be there.
Yeah.
You don't have that much traffic going.
I understand that, and as we, spoke many of times
I'm
about
gonna
that,
debate you
know.
that, we're gonna debate that later.
As we said, we were not against growth. We know that growth, and we know there's an area.
I don't blame the people in James City for being suspicious of DOT, believe me. They've been sliced and diced for 100 years out there.
Everybody has.
Just a comment though, Havelock is about to start the process of working on their bypass, and we'll see what it does to
Yes,
their
they're going-
businesses.
they're
So
going to
there's quite a
bypass.
bit that's going in, even around Cherry Point, to change what they call the flyover and all. And since I have the floor, I did find that piece of paper that talks about the TIM study. Can I steal 2 minutes and tell you what it really
Sure.
says? Because this, and I'd be happy to show it to you. Again, I went to the Finland experience. You can pull this up on your website and read about it. Every teacher in Finland must have a master's degree. They are screened to be teachers when they're in high school, if not before. Right? So that's who we use as our benchmark for they're doing it right. This is 4th grade math, 2011, which was the last time the study was put together. The United States, our national score was 541, Finland 545. Want to guess what North Carolina 4th grade was? 554, 10 more than Finland. So you go to 8th grade, United States 509, Finland 514, North Carolina 537, 20-some points above. We're doing something right. It goes back to what Denny said. We are doing something right. Now, there's more to be done.
There's no doubt, North Carolina does a great job educating kids. The problem you're gonna have, especially here in Craven County, is being able to keep those teachers that not gonna go to another field financially.
I agree. I said that earlier. My other
In the
comment-
school I'm in right now, I think we're losing about 7 teachers after this end of the school
You
year.
and I are going to talk later because we'll find out where you are. I would like to also comment, look at Finland, look at Craven County and the demographics, totally different. And for us to be that successful with our demographics, I think it speaks for what our teachers, what our schools are doing, and our parents. It's a full package.
Let me take a moment and introduce my friend. You always want this guy to be your friend.
Don't want to pull it up.
I want to always be standing right behind him. But Derek Dubé is a sergeant, obviously, with the 3 stripes, obviously. He is in charge of what the New Bern Police Department now calls the battleground
Community Policing District.
Right. So he's in charge of all of the policing that's done in the city of New Bern on this side of the river. So if you live in the city, any of the developments on this side of the river, he's our guy, okay? And I asked him to come back. He was going to the other meeting and just take a minute, Derek.
The other meeting was Creekside Homeowners Association. We're trying to get a community watch up and running there, and they had some traffic issues. So that was the original intent, and they thought it was here. But how many of y'all live inside the city limits this side of the river? Okay. What we do is you have myself and 4 officers who are your community officers. We try and take a lot of extra time, a lot of extra effort getting to know these communities, spend a lot of extra time in the community. So like when they were raising issues, I already had answers for them because I knew the exact homes they were talking about. I could tell you who lived there, how many kids were there. That's what we do. If you have any issues in your communities, you can follow them up through, you can email BGD, I think, at newbernpd.org, or call the police department, ask for Sergeant Dubé, and they'll get you my voicemail. Anything you have, send it to us, and we'll address it and get it back to you as fast as we can. Any questions?
Just one comment. We had a break-in of an automobile in Taberna about 3 or 4 months ago, and there was a bunch of stuff flying around on tab mail, and the lady basically, I communicated with her because I was concerned that she couldn't find a phone number of the police department. And so I contacted her and I said, it's 911. And this was at 2 in the morning. She heard somebody breaking into her car. Her comment to me was, she said, no, I didn't want to call that because that's for real police problems or something. I said, ma'am, someone breaking into a vehicle is a serious problem. And I think Derek would agree with me. If you got a question about the police department or what's going on, and something you'd like them to watch over, or you're going on vacation and you want somebody to kind of keep, that's when you call him and leave a message on his voicemail. But if somebody's breaking into your car, you dial 911.
The only thing I do ask is if you call the office and get my other contact numbers other than just my office number. I'm going night shift, so wait till after.
I've got his cell number.
Just wait till after lunch to make that phone call, so I can understand what you're saying and not be sleeping. But yeah, anything y'all need, that's what we're here for. I'm working pretty closely with all the community watch has.
I'm gonna just kind of end, hold on, Josh, before you go.
But I gotta say one thing before you end. If you saw my grades in college, you'd know that my grandsons didn't get their smarts on this side of the family. I just want to make that disclaimer. So,
I wanted to kind of end by pointing out a couple things. One, we're over here at the fire department. I'm remiss by not mentioning them, but the county, does have a volunteer fire department, and these guys, you can't say enough for them. Unfortunately, I was talking with Ed a little earlier, who's been with this fire department for an awful long time. He says that they have trouble recruiting volunteers now. I mean, the young people, it used to be honorable to serve in a rescue squad, a volunteer rescue, or a fire department. I mean, when I was growing up, kids did it all the time. It was a big to-do. It was like a club, but young people now don't see it like that, and that's going to be a challenge, as Ed was pointing out to me, of manning these fire departments as it comes. I don't know that you aren't going to have to end up going paid. Now, with the rescue squads, they used to be all volunteer. A lot of them, almost all of them now are paid. You just couldn't get the volunteers, and that's critical.
But there's another piece to that, is that the requirements for a volunteer today on either rescue or fire, they've got to be certified, they've got to go through training. In the old days, they just showed up and
you got to have 30 hours updated training, I think, is that correct? For EMS,
I don't know.
Much in paralegal and EMS. It's a lot of, so I mean, it's
serious.
just tougher. The guys are better trained probably, but that could be a big issue for the county at some point in time on funding that. And the other thing that I'm taking very seriously is economic development, and I won't go into all that because that would be a fairly long conversation at this point in time, but
and Steve and I both have that as one of our main concerns, economic development.
The county is too dependent on Cherry Point. I hope it'll always be there. The Fleet Readiness Center, hope it'll always be there, but we're heavily dependent on that. We need to start diversifying our economy a little bit more, and I hope it is a big challenge. The more I learn about it, the more challenging I see it's going to be, because you've got every other county in the United States thinking the same thing. We need to get serious about economic development. Only so many companies in this nation that you can try to pull this way, and so many things that you can do.
You get me the Career Academy and we'll draw this industry.
We're going to get you there. David, you want to say comments about your challenges, your biggest challenges?
I think right now the biggest challenge is the unknown in the budget. And yes, that does go back to class size and teachers. I think the second biggest challenge, and it may be even bigger, is keeping our teachers motivated during this pay freeze and being 48th in the nation unpaid, especially when they see what happens in Chicago and whatever. We also have to implement Common Core so that it continues to grow and improve our education system. And I really do believe, and again, Dr. Brown is the person that is pushing it. I do believe in her energies and her philosophy, and let's just see where that goes. And I would ask you to be at least somewhat optimistic that we will continue to grow. It is intended to challenge, and it's also intended to increase the rigor and the level of curriculum activities that will grow our education. I'm new, I'm learning every day, and I think this was a great opportunity to hear our community. And I thank Steve for inviting me.
We'll do it again, if, you know, maybe 6, 8 months from now, we'll have another. Appreciate everybody coming out, and if you have any questions you'd like to talk after the rest of you that want to leave.
Thank you for coming, and if you have something one-on-one, please contact me.
I have 2 sets of warning.